Greetings once again, all you spider people out there. Duuz-Diz-Din back again with a movie review. This time, Spider-Man Across the Spider-Verse. We already stepped our big toe into the Spider-Verse. Now we're traveling across the Spider-Verse. And next time we'll see what lies beyond the Spider-Verse. I really do appreciate what they've been doing. It's very much like the Spider-Man Homecoming, Far From Home, No Way Home kind of situation. It's been fun. And in my opinion, just right out the gate, this movie is in some ways better than the previous movies, in some ways not so much. But if you watch it as a collective, you'll enjoy it all the same. So Miles has been Spider-Man for, how long did they say? About a year and a half or so? And he's been doing a pretty decent job, all things considered. He makes his mistakes, butts heads with his dad, both as Spider-Man and as his regular self. Has the problem that most spider people do, and that's the work-life balance, but anyone has that problem. And he ends up longing for people who can understand his point of view. He longs to be with those friends he made previously who were also spider people. That sense of belonging. So when Gwen comes in saying that she's teamed up with all these spider people across the multiverse, Miles wants to get in on it. But for some reason, Gwen keeps him at a distance, which is in truth the way the leader of this spider society, Miguel O'Hara, Spider-Man 2099, wants it. In fact, the only reason Gwen has come to Miles' dimension is to track this villain that Miles has been dealing with called the Spot, who is gaining greater and greater multiversal tampering. He's becoming a bigger and bigger threat, mostly because he's deeply connected to Miles, mostly through happenstance, and in no way that Miles would really understand. So Gwen goes to chase the Spot, and Miles follows, wanting to prove himself. They end up in Spider-Man India's dimension, which is so cool, where the Spot has found another Alchemax, and their Super Collider. I love the instances of the Super Collider, keep everything connected. They team up with Spider-Man India and then eventually Spider-Punk, which is funny because in the comics he hates being called Spider-Punk. He's like, no, I earned the name Spider-Man. But here, Spider-Punk is good enough. But the Spot manages to gain his power, he manages to go free. The Spider people are called to the Spider Society HQ where they go to meet Miguel O'Hara, who reads Miles the Riot Act. But it's all stuff that Miles would have no way of knowing. And that's the biggest thing. Miguel keeps being pissed at Miles, but Miles does not know. If you were to maybe inform him, give him at least some time to marinate on some of these ideas, maybe Miles would come to his own understanding. But Miguel is a little too hot-headed. Tells Miles the Super Collider problems. He even makes a reference at one point to No Way Home with what Doctor Strange and the Spider-Man of the MCU did. I love that. We even get to see clips of how there's always an uncle who dies, or there's always a police sergeant who dies. And Miles had disrupted things in Spider-Man India's universe because he was supposed to let the police chief, who was the dad of Spider-Man India's girlfriend, die, and he didn't. They call it canon events, and I love how they use actual story terminology for certain things. But as it turns out, the reason why Miguel was the biggest on not having Miles, and even not having Gwen incorporated to this, because Miles' dad is about to become police captain, just like Gwen's dad. And by not having them die, that could cause their entire universe to unravel. And Miguel knows about this because he interfered with another universe's goings-on, and that caused that universe to unravel. But of course, Miles is having none of that, thanks to Spider-Punk, who was in Miles' corner from moment one. From moment one, he's essentially telling Miles how to escape, and that he's not gonna like it here at the Spider Society. And man, Hobie was spot on. Love Spider-Punk in this. But we have this thrilling chase of all the spider people coming after Miles. And towards the end of the chase, when Miguel corners Miles, he even tells him, you weren't supposed to be a spider person. You're an anomaly, because the spider that bit you was was brought in from another dimension. But Miles is undeterred, manages to use a special machine that the Spider Society has to transport him back to his Earth. But when Gwen goes to Miles' reality to try to find him, as well as Miguel Ben Reilly, who is very 90s. But some people have griped about how over the top Ben Reilly was. A lot of the Spider people are over the top. They've made fun of Miguel's over the top nature. And just compare Spider-Man Noir to his comic book counterpart, how overly noir he is, or Spider-Pig or Peter Porker, compare him to his comic book counterpart and how overly cartoony he is, or even Penny Parker and how overly anime she is compared to her comic book counterpart. You know, people complaining about, oh, Ben Reilly, they made him dumb and overly 90s and this, that, and the other. I'm just like, no, watching this series is like, this is par for the course. But they go to track down Miles, and as it turns out, he was sent to the Earth that the spider that bit him was from. The DNA that was incorporated into Miles' body comes from another dimension, and that's where he was sent. A dimension where his dad is dead, his Uncle Aaron is still alive, and the Miles of that world was never bit by a radioactive spider. In fact, he turned to a life of crime, becoming the Prowler, which I love, because that's basically a callback to how Miles in the comics is from the ultimate universe. And the question was always, well, if he's from another universe, what about Miles from the main comic book universe? And it turns out that Miles is a criminal who becomes the criminal known as Ultimatum. But I love the idea of that this evil version of Miles being the Prowler. So we end with Miles caught by this alternate version of Miles who could have gotten bitten by the spider. Maybe that would have changed his life around. But we see that Gwen has assembled all of Miles' old friends and the newer friends he's made. So those who have defected from Miguel. We're talking Gwen, Peter B. Parker, and his so adorable daughter Mayday, who I love the callback to Spider-Girl. Everyone called it. Everyone knew it was going to happen. It was, Peter B. Parker even talks about the reason he had a kid was because of Miles, which I love. I love that chemistry. Spider-Man India, because let's face it, that version of Spider-Man vibed with Miles day one. It was like, we are immediately friends. Spider UK, because down with the establishment. Spider-Punk. And of course his friends from the first movie, Spider-Man Noir, Peter Porker, Penny Parker, who now is in a mech and outfit a little bit more in line with how she looked in the comics. Originally, I was actually bummed because I didn't know if they were even going to be in the movie because they weren't present until Penny showed up as part of the Spider Society, and Noir and Porker didn't show up until the very end when they were brought in by Gwen. But I love the setup, and the thing is, the reason why I feel like this isn't quite as good as the previous movie is simply because it's obvious it's part one to a two-part story. That's the thing. That's the only major gripe. This is a part one. There's no way around it. This is a part one. It ends on a major cliffhanger. Nothing is resolved. It's all just problems that need a resolution. As the Spot is headed to Miles's home dimension to end up killing his father. And I love that connection though too, because they're relating everything to George Stacy in the main timeline. But the thing is, and this ends up happening to Gwen. Gwen's situation is fun because we open up mostly with Gwen and her problem and her situation. Honestly, it's most of her comic book run up to a certain point. And that's her having a friend, Peter, who isn't the one bitten by a spider, but he ends up becoming the lizard by testing things on himself to get back at a bully. He ends up dying in the ensuing fight between him and Spider-Woman Gwen. Haley Steinfeld does another amazing job as this. Haley Steinfeld is just killing it everything I've seen her in, whether it be Arcane or Hawkeye, whatever. But she's going through it because she feels so alone, just like Miles. But in a fight with a vulture from another dimension, where she teams up with Spider-Man 2099 and Spider-Woman Jessica Drew, her dad ends up actually finding out that she's Spider-Woman, and he still tries to go and arrest her, trying to do things by the book. And so despite Miguel's protests, Gwen leaves with them. Gwen is fighting for this place of belonging, and because she has this tumultuous relationship with her dad, and then you find out her dad is supposed to die essentially, and it's just like, man, Gwen, are you really okay with having that happen? But when she ends up kind of siding with Miles and getting blamed for bringing him into the whole Spider Society to begin with, Miguel kicks her out. She goes home, meets her with her dad, they reconcile a bit, and we find out that her dad has resigned from being a police captain, showing that things can change and not have disastrous results. And it's obvious it's because of Gwen talking to her dad that changed things. It is the result of Gwen from that reality changing things. And that's the impetus for her bringing this team together, showing that, Miles saving his dad probably wouldn't have the same results that Miguel is so fearful of. And some people have even criticized the fact that so many people sided with Miguel's stance on basically just being a bystander, and it feels obvious to me that comes from the fact that they're fearful of so much unraveling. It is something that if you were to show that, hey, there is a way to save lives and not have more lives put in jeopardy just by saving one, everyone would go along with it. But I understand some people's criticism. But Miles's tumultuous relationship with both his dad and his mom was very interesting. I love the talks that Miles had with his mom, because his mom, wasn't that much of a prominent character in the first movie, but we're doing a lot more with her in this one, which I was really happy about. I love that we've kept the relationship between Miles and his parents such a strong thing in the series. I also love Gwen talking about how Gwen Stacy usually falls in love with Spider-Man, and it usually doesn't work out very well. And then Miles is just like, well, there's a first time for everything. Peter B. Parker being back and having a darn name Mayday was a great callback to the Spider-Girl comics, and the idea of a universe where Peter didn't sell his marriage to the devil. It was mostly just they had problems, had a divorce, then they got back together later, had a kid. Bada bing, bada boom. And I love that heart-to-heart that Peter B. Parker had with Miles, saying, I had this baby because of you, because I hope that I could raise a child half as amazing as you are. And Mayday was adorable. Oh my goodness. And man, every time Miles gave Peter B. Parker or Gwen those disappointed looks and just, heartbreaking. And the Spot, man, finding out that he brought the spider from an alternate dimension that ended up biting Miles. He was working on the super collider. He was the scientist who got hit with a bagel in the first movie. Like, the thing is, the Spot, he's not really too prominent of a character. He can be menacing a few times. You've had him in a few series. The most menacing I've ever felt he's been was in the 90s Spider-Man series. He has been in the last, 2019 Spider-Man series? But man, he goes from being a bit of a joke like you would think he is, and I love the escalation to him becoming more and more powerful, more and more adept with his abilities. Like, the evolution of the Spot becoming more menacing is beautifully done in this. From a joke who's basically ends up kicking his own butt at one point, to being flung into the multiverse, finding that he has multiversal abilities, going from barely handling himself against one Spider-Man to easily handing the butt of 4 spider people to him. Like, that scene at Alchemax in Spider-Man India's dimension, and he is just masterfully creating portals left, right, center, just teleporting people one place and getting around certain characters and using his abilities in creative way to snip webbing here and there and just portaling closer and closer to certain things, not even needing to use doors. It's just like, what need do I have of doors? I can create portals anywhere and any when. Like, dude, oh man, the spot got so cool. Like, the animation and the creativity of how this character moved was spot on, pun fully intended. And the thing from the comics is that the Spot doesn't always set off Spider-Man's spider sense, because he could start a punch in another dimension and then the connection will be Spider-Man's face. Like, you have to be at the top of your game when dealing with the Spot. You gotta be thinking multi-dimensional chess when it comes to the Spot, and I loved it. Jessica Drew Spider-Woman, the change up to her being African-American was cool. You know, I love the design. I've always been a sucker for the biker chick design they gave her. And she's gone back to her classic design, which was kind of a bummer because I really did love the biker chick design. But hey, if they make an alternate Jessica Drew in the comics who is black and keeps the biker chick design, I'd love it. And she's one big reference to the most prominent storyline from that era of Spider-Man, which was her being pregnant and still kicking ass. Also, the webbing from her fingertips. Cool stuff. But the only thing that didn't endear me to her was just how harsh she could be. And Jessica Drew could be a little bit harsh in a lot of instances, but ooh, man, way too harsh. Way too harsh. But you saw a little bit of her softer side towards the end of the movie as, well, throughout, because she does have a bit of a soft spot for Gwen, but she will be a bit harsh in other instances. But ultimately, it's obvious she knows Gwen is up to something, but does not pursue. Because it's easy to forget a lot of these characters are heroes who are trying to do what they think is best. And Pavitir Prabhakar, is that how you say it? He's voiced by Dopinder from the Deadpool movies, and I loved it. They got such an amazing guy for that, and I love the redesign. I've always just kind of not liked the Spider-Man India design, mostly because it felt lazy. You know, you have open finger gloves, and then from the waist down he has a bit of an Indian design, and that's about it. And I'm just like, that's kind of weak sauce, man. There's nothing like overly visually iconic about how Spider-Man India looks. And then you get to this, and it's just like, oh my God, I love it. The flowing hair, the design for the costume, the yo-yo kind of thing that he wields with his bracelet, and just, oh man, they made him so cool. Visually amazing. I immediately need you to put that into the comics. Like, just do it now. Like, once again, Spider-Verse has just been like, oof, all the goodness for the comics, because that was the redesign that was needed. There you go. Like, that screams Spider-Man India. That's not discount Spider-Man India. And his universe being called Mumbatan, a combination of Mumbai and Manhattan, I loved it. I loved it. Makes me think of freaking San Francisco from Big Hero 6. And just everything about his dimension, and Gaitra, his girlfriend, and Inspector Singh, and just, because he was one of the first alternate Spider-Man. Well, more prominent alternate Spider-Man, because he had a book called Spider-Man India. And that had some really cool stuff. But again, the only thing that always put me down was the fact that it's just like, man, his costume does not look creative. So I say, yes, supplement this into the comics ASAP, baby. And then Spider-Punk. Man, Hobie Brown is only cool when it's not Hobie Brown. Like, it's either a clone of Hobie, or it's his identity as the Prowler, but it's Aaron Davis the Prowler. Speaking of which, I love that they had Childish Gambino in this movie as a nod to the Prowler from the MCU and what he could become. Loved it. But they made some changes. Instead of being an American punk guy, he's a British punk guy, which, come on, punk British, come on. I guess that would make him technically an alternate Spider-Man UK, but I mean, come on. It just makes so much sense. And getting Daniel Kaluuya, who was, what was it, Kwabe from Black Panther? I mean, he's not around too much, but dude, the moments he is in the movie, mwah. And I heard that it took them a good long time to animate him, because he has a particular look to him that's just like, yeah, I can see this taking a bit of effort, but he is on Miles's side from moment one, telling him you don't need the Spider Society, teaching him how to best utilize his abilities and powers, which was essentially like giving him a heads up on how to break free of being contained. Oh, so good. I think the only thing that throws me off is just how tall he is. Like, jeebus. And then Spider-Man 2099, Miguel, it makes sense, because in the comics, there was a divide of the Spider people too. And it was those who sided with Peter from the main Spider-Man universe who didn't want to kill their enemies, and it was Otto Octavius, who was the superior Spider-Man, Doc Ock in Peter's body, who was all about that murder, doing what needs to be done. And Miguel siding with a little bit more of the kill murdery makes a bit of sense. Miguel's a little bit kinder than that, but he does tend to be a little bit more hard edge than all of the other Spider people. But ultimately, Miguel is a good person deep down, and he's a little bit funner than, at least in more recent years, than what we've kind of seen in this movie, and I do see him coming around. I want him to come around towards the end of the next movie, because I don't want him to just be seen as a villain. Also, Ben Reilly. The discord behind Ben Reilly. I get it, because Marvel keeps kind of doing Ben dirty in a lot of senses from what they've done to him in the comics over the past decade, if not more than that. How his story, the whole clone thing, is always kind of treated as much more of a joke than actually played straight. And the only time his whole story was actually taken seriously in the past several decades was kind of in Ultimate Spider-Man. And even then, they called him Ben, but that was Kane, if not more than anything else. The one time where the whole spider-clone thing was actually really treated with some length and some depth, and with a good amount of time, and you didn't even use Ben. You used Kane Ben. It was kind of a bummer. Also, the introduction of Spider-Bite, who also joined Gwen to help out Miles, who is Margot Kess, who I was surprised by, because she hasn't really had that many appearances. So to have her be a little bit more prominent kind of threw me off a little bit, because honestly, you have some of the most prominent alternate Spider-Men joining Miles. And that's Spider-Pig, Spider-Man Noir, Penny Parker, Spider-Gwen or Ghost Spider, Spider-Man India, and Spider-Punk. Like, they're very popular, very prominent characters. But then you get Spider-Bite, and it's just like, okay then. But I know the Spot is the main villain of the next movie, but so much is just kind of ready to be answered. It almost felt like this movie, if you gave it another hour, it could have been done. So I'm not sure. Maybe it'll be Miles needing to get the other Spider people to understand that they can save lives without putting their universe in danger. Because that's the only way I could see most of any of these Spider people not saving lives no matter what, is the thought of them putting more lives in danger. And I feel like we need to have a moment where it's understood that more of them want to side with Miles. In fact, if you're watching this video at all, it said that the people on the right to Miles are the ones who end up siding with them, and the people on the left are the ones who side more with Miguel, which is unfortunate because I see Spider-Man from the PS5 game and Spinneret, who is Mary Jane over there and stuff, which is unfortunate. But you also have Josh Keaton, Spectacular Spider-Man, on that side too, who did come up to Miles telling him, hey, sometimes, these things need to happen, and it's just like, no, Josh Keaton Spider-Man would never say that. So I am interested to see what will happen to this whole divide, because even in the comics, the divide of Spider People, yeah, there was the divide, but they ended up coming back together in the end for the greater good. So I want to hear from you. Do you think all the Spider People will come together, or will there still be that divide? Because ultimately, Spider-Man does what's right in the end, and I can't see none of them going with a better way to save even more lives if it isn't presented to them. I mean, if it is presented to them. That Miles can help change those who have kind of lost their way for the better. Show them how to be even more of a hero than they already are. But again, let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Like and subscribe if you enjoyed the ride, so you don't miss out on my next review. And until then, I've been Duuz-Diz-Din. Thanks for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Take care. Bye-bye.